a true partial. So that's kind of what we went over last time. What I'm going to do this time is kind of talk about some rules versus guidelines and why you can skirt the guidelines, but you can't really skirt the rules. And then go over a couple of things I've picked off of the April tape that I thought might be interesting to talk about. So if you do take the class, the next session is June 15th. It's about 4 hours of a Saturday morning, and it goes over in detail what is a partial, what's the math behind the partial. That's probably the longest section of the class. And then selling a partial, which is all of the paperwork and setup you need, how to manage the partial, and then building out the business with investors and how to automate things and that sort of stuff. So that's what the class is about.
And you'll throw the link in the chat, right?
I will, yes.
Okay.
So the guidelines when you're wanting to create a partial and sell a partial, the guidelines all depend on why you're wanting to sell a partial. Like there are several different things you can do to sell a partial. You can sell a partial because you're retiring in 10 years and you don't need the capital now, but you want to build up cash flow so that when you hit your retirement date, all of that money comes back to you and you have monthly cash flow and you don't have to worry about the stock market and retirement funds and all of that sort of stuff. You can also create partials where the partial buyer pays for the entire thing. So when you get the partial back at the end of the payments, you have no money in the deal. So your return is infinite. You can also set it up and look for specific loans that would give you some money up front as well. So you could sell the partial and get a $2,000 paycheck at the front end, and then you have money on the back end. And we'll go through examples because I know it's hard to kind of envision these while I'm talking. And then the third thing is if you still want cash flow, but you want some of your money back to keep investing, you can sell what I call a partial. And that's basically you're splitting the monthly payment by some percentage, 50-50, 60-40, however you want to set it up, giving your partial buyer that 50% and then retaining that 50% for you. So you get some of your money back from the partial, but you're also still getting monthly cash flow. So those are kind of the three ways that I think about notes when I'm looking at how to create a partial out of a specific note. And this is relevant when you're scraping the tape because each one of those scenarios, you look at the notes a little differently depending on how you want to sell a partial. So the rules around partials, which are all about managing your risk, it needs to be performing, and that's non-negotiable because you are collateralizing the payments of the loan coming in. So if there's no payments, you have no collateral. You want a really strong pay history. You can create a loan on a sub-performing note, but it opens up your risk that the loan goes, is going to go non-performing in the future. Yes, Jasmine.
Just to reiterate, can you give the rule of, I don't say rule of thumb, but what you like to look for as far as seasoning?
So I like to have at least 12 months seasoning. Typically, if a loan is going to go bad early, it's going to be within the first 6 to 8 months. So having a seasoning of at least a year, and then the longer the seasoning, the lower the risk. But it raises the risk that you might get a payoff. So that's what I advise for seasoning. Of course, your mileage may vary. You may want to do it off of table funding deals or off of things that you're originating. That's up to you, but you just have to understand what the risks are involved in that. And the kind of ground rule is consistent payments. So they don't necessarily have to be perfect pay, but you don't want someone who pays 9 out of 12 months and they catch themselves up every time, but they're still lagging because those are higher risk of ending up non-performing. And when you have a partial, it's all about managing your risk and trying to make it so that trying to pick the notes that are least likely to run into any problems. So any questions regarding kind of the ground rules and then the guidelines?
I like the slow and steady. I'll put some inventory in the background unless you have the spreadsheet available to show.
I do. That was actually the next thing I was going to pull up.
But yeah, I think one of the important things is just slow and steady wins the race. So that's what this partial part is about. And some of you have invested with me over the past 10 plus years. So you've watched all of us kind of mature with our strategies, right? And this is really what we're looking for, slow and steady versus some of that non-performing stuff that's a little more inconsistent and less stable.
Yeah. And I, like many of you starting out with NAP, non-performers were what I wanted. And in the 4 years since I'm an old lady investor now, I want cash flow. I want performing stuff. So this is the April tape.
I think we age quickly in this industry, like cat years or dog years.
Yes, I'm an old lady investor now. I go to bed at 8 o'clock, drink tea in the afternoon. So there's 2 notes on here that I wanted to talk about. One is on the lower balance performing notes tab. And it's one of the Arkansas notes that has a perfect pay history. And this one has kind of a lower interest rate. It's a 6.5%. The monthly payment is $700, which might not work if you're doing a split payment partial, the partial, because then you're down in the low 300s for the payment. But this could work if you are retiring in, 10 years, just picking that. Because you'd sell 120 payments, and that's what that would look like. This would not work if you wanted to sell the whole thing, and I'll go over that in a minute. So if you could buy it at a 95% discount, your yield's going to be 8.57%, and your net yield ends up being 7.7%. And the difference between the 2 numbers is net yield is subtracting your servicing fee. So in this case, I put a servicing fee of $30 because that's what I think that's what Madison and a couple of the other places that I've used are running for a performer. So when you are part of the class and you can purchase this outright, you get this partial calculator, and I've kind of pre-populated it with the information already. But you enter in the monthly payment, the UPB, the number of payments remaining, what your purchase price was. And then if you've held it for a little while, your current note details might be a little different. But since we're analyzing something we're in the process of buying, I just enter in the information. Your investor requirements. So this is the yield that you want to sell to your investor. And it can be anything you want. 8% is probably pretty typical. You'll find people who want 12%, and you'll find a rare few people who are happy with 6 or 7. And then these bottom 2 sections are if you're giving a full partial or if you're giving a partial. So this top section with the full payment, if I were retiring in 120 days, I would sell, or 120 months, 10 years, I would sell 120 payments, and I would get $55,599.06 from my partial purchaser. And then they would collect 120 payments. And when the note reverted back to me, when I'm set to retire, I have 2 years of payments left, and my yield, my net yield is 85%. So one of the really powerful things about partials is it can up your yield by quite a bit because the money that you're having into it, in this case, $7,500.
Gotcha. Can I interject real quick too, because I want to bring up 2 points that I want people to think about. Interest rates, like she said, this is amazing that she picked one with a lower interest rate because she's showing you how to you can just massage it and make it more. But more importantly, or equally as important, interest rates are high now. So right now, there's not many people interested in 6%. But think about, pre-pandemic or even just, before they started all these rates, that was a pretty attractive rates to a conservative investor. So People like doctors love that stuff, real conservative people, IRA money, because if it's really as conservative as you can present it. So I was going to say that's the other pool of money that you're looking for is people who are just looking to put something in an IRA that's going to be tax deductible, right? Not tax deductible, sorry, tax sheltered. So therefore, that 6% that you're offering them can really look more like an 8 or what have you, depending on what what their tax rate is. So I just wanted to bring that into the scene.
Yep, appreciate that. So looking at the other two scenarios that I talked about, there's no way, there's only 144 payments left, that I'm going to be able to sell this note and get all my money back. So that this particular note would not be a good candidate for that strategy. But I could sell, 24 months and give someone 12%, and I'm still making 11%, which isn't great from what we've seen, but it's still not a bad thing. So you do have some flexibility with this one. And like I said earlier about the partial, your investor's partial payment in this case is $350 if you're doing a 50% split, and your monthly payment is $322 because you're taking the servicing fee out of your half of that payment. So it can still work. $322 a month is not at all a bad thing to have coming in. But this calculator gives you those options so you can play with the numbers. But yeah, I picked the low interest rate one on purpose to show that even though the note rate is only 6% and the net yield with your discount is 7% and change, you can manipulate the numbers to get a good yield for yourself. Yes, Rhonda.
I just had a quick question on the partial payments. You're only selling 60 payments, so you get the full amount after that 60th month.
Yeah, month 61, you're back to getting the 700 and whatever the monthly payment is, 704.57.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes, Drew.
Hi. Are you sharing your screen with a spreadsheet on it by chance, or no?
I am, yes.
Yes, we can see it.
I don't see it on an iPad. Maybe it doesn't work. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Sorry about that. I don't know how to help with that. So that's that note. The other note that I found interesting was on the Texas tab. And it was the bottom note in Houston. And these ones are offered at par. So in theory, when you're figuring out what your yield is going to be, it should pretty much match the note yield. And here, for this bottom row, you can see that even with the servicing fee discounted, my net yield is higher than the note rate. And so when stuff like this happens, this isn't partial specific. This is more just like generic scrape the tape and analyzing notes. I know that something is a little wonky with the numbers. And so in this particular case, if you look at, this is a 30-year mortgage. They're in, month, I don't know, there's been like a year and a half of payments. But if you look at how much the current loan balance is versus what the original UPB was, you know that they've been making extra payments. And you know this because, the payment rate is 8.75%. And at the beginning of a loan, it is mostly interest. Thank you, amortization table. So this will still absolutely work. But you want to realize that this particular person apparently wants to pay down their debt quickly. And I don't know, you won't know until you get the payment history how quickly they're paying it down. But it's something that puts up a red flag to investigate further for me.
And so for those who are new, why would you be concerned if they're paying it back early? And then lastly, I would say that you're going to want to check that UPB because she's correct. There's probably something off, and it could also be just as simple as that UPB has not really been updated. right, to reflect it, but it's a good catch to show you that those numbers are really sensitive and math is everything, right? So you want to investigate further. And if they are paying early, what is the significance of that? And right before you answer that, I love that you're putting in that price because this one has a nice P&I, right? So now you have a lot more to spread for if you're selling the rate and stuff. But yeah, so why would you be concerned about that for those who are new?
If they're paying it off early, this is a 30-year mortgage. So if they're trying to accelerate and pay it down early, they're probably not going to do much more than, 15 or 20 years. So you'll probably still be in the note for quite a while, but the amount of interest you're collecting as the investor goes down because of the way the amortization table works. So if they're making, an extra $500 a month principal payments, then the amount of interest that you're going to be collecting over the lifetime of the loan is going to be less, which might be fine with you. I don't know that I would have a problem with it, but it's just something that you want to consider. Oops. All right, so with this, you have a good interest rate, you have quite a long ramp, which makes it easier to do the scenario where you're paying off the entire loan with the money that you get from the partial. And with this, the calculator is not smart enough to figure out where that break-even point is, so you can just start entering numbers, and this green section over here is kind of the dollar bills as you, the note owner, has. 90, 220, close, 230. So here, if you sold 235 payments, you would get a purchase price from your partial person of $172,000 and change. And that means that you get money up front of $1,255.89, and you have no money in the deal. So you have a net yield of infinity. But most importantly, after you get the payments back, after those 235 months back, and they're not going to last that long for a number of reasons. Or I shouldn't say never, but it's very rare that someone stays in their 30-year mortgage for the entire time. But you still have 102 payments left over, and that's free money. So you're getting a net profit of $150,000 for no money down. Finding the people who have $170,000 to spend on this might be a little challenging, but the way you get around that is by selling 5 years of partials, and then another 5 years of partials, and then another 5 years of partials. So you're not making the upfront money, but you still end up with no money into it, depending on how you set up. And honestly, when I've sold partials, they've been in the $30,000 to $50,000 range with 30-year mortgage, and I'm buying I buy the note like 300 payments, and then I can sell 170 payments and pay for the whole note. So yeah, to Jasmine's point in the chat, if you have someone with a large retirement account and they just want the monthly passive income to come in, then this would be a really good option for that. The partial option looks a lot nicer with the monthly payment of $700 for you. And here you're still getting a yield of almost 19% if you sell it for 5 years. So
I was going to say, what's amazing about these particular notes, right? So you always want, especially if you're the one that's bringing the opportunity, you want to know the story behind the notes. So, because that's where that security comes, and that's where you become a better operator than the average person. And so what I would say is that with these particular notes, if you go back to the spreadsheet, I will show you that they are what we call ITIN. So if you scroll,
I hate a bunch of fields, so let me know
okay.
what I need to
Yeah, no
uncover.
worries, no worries. I'm glad you did. But especially for you, those of you who have the spreadsheet, you know what they are. But when you're in the business and you get it, you're gonna get Social Security numbers, ITIN numbers. So real quickly, this is a portfolio that I have from a person who does underwriting, not a person, a company that's underwriting in Texas. So they have an unlimited stream of these for the most part. They underwrite about 50 million of these on a monthly basis. And they go specifically after ITIN. And so those guys are foreign investors or foreign what are they called? Gosh, I'm tongue tied today. People who live in America who are foreigners, and they now have those ITIN instead of Social Security. So why do I bring that up? Is because if you know, you know, but those guys are some of the most strong and steady payers. So these are the things that are going to be, you're going to find that in the pay history. You always want to check the pay history, of course, but you won't be surprised to see that they're going to make their payments until they do the refi, like Alecia is saying, but you're going to find more steady payments in this than the average person in America. So it's a good thing to kind of know the story behind the notes, where they come from, and that you have a relationship with the person. So if they have 50 million and we can continue buying over and over, then if anything does happen, we can always go back to them and, you know, get things ironed out.
Yep. So, those are the two that I wanted to talk about. Let me see if I had anything else. No, that's what I had, Jasmine. I don't know if we can go through other notes if anybody wants to see what they look like in the calculator.
Yeah, I was just going to say
something
the
else to
same
talk
thing.
about.
Leave questions to the audience. And do you guys have any, especially if you're looking at something, any of you guys considering a note and you want her to run through, this would be a great opportunity. But while people are thinking about questions, this particular screen you're showing makes me think right off the bat, what are the top 3 or 5, whatever you have, things that you look at, right, before you say, I want to look further into this note. So obviously, when you get a tape, you're not getting the pay history yet. So, and you showed that you can do some calculations to kind of see if there's anything, you know, suspicious before you get that. But what are like the top 3 to 5 things that you look on a tape? If you don't have them, you'll request before you can even say, I'm interested in a note.
So I always look at the P&I because, and I kind of have a rule of thumb that I don't go below 300 because once you go below 300, and I would honestly like be closer to 6 to 8, but sometimes those are harder to find on the tapes. But your yield starts decreasing faster the smaller the monthly payment is. And the reason for that is if you're looking at your net yield, the more, the higher your servicing fee is and the smaller your monthly payment is, the more yield you're losing to that servicing fee. So for a performing note, the average servicing fee is about $30 a month. And so I'll go in and calculate, like I added this yield column myself. That's not something that came with the spreadsheet. Because I want to make sure that, you know, my net yield is still going to be good. And then the other things I look at, you know, I look at the ROI, I look at the value of the house. And I want to make sure that's a double-digit number, just because if it's not, then the loan to value is not going to be great, and that's going to be a riskier loan, potentially. So those are 2 things that I look at. Trying to think what else I do.
How important are remaining months? Like, do you shy away from loans that have 100 months or less, or obviously the more the better, but
the more the better because it's easier to make partials on ones with longer. But I usually want at least 5 years remaining, so at least 60 months. And I may, you know, for lower value or for lower time remaining, I might not sell partials on them. But I also, like, one of the partials that I sold recently only had 5 years left on it, or I think slightly more than 5 years left on it. And so I just sold most of the note. I think I get 2 payments on the back end from it. So I'm not that picky on how long, because since selling partials is all just math, I'm more concerned with the riskiness of the loan
Good to know.
than I am about the numbers of the loan. So P&I is important. How long is left on the loan is something I look at, but it's not a deal breaker. The seasoning, it's at least 12 months of seasoning. They're kind of I was going to bring up another calculator that I use. That's not going to be very fast, so give me a minute. And it's my secret sauce calculator. So
sign up for the class. It'll be great to get some of that back end understanding. And so part of the reason, just to reiterate, we have her breaking and launching off a separate class for the hypothecation is because it actually requires a whole different set of training and different math skills. And once you can master those, it's amazing what you can do with them. And so as we are building out the private equity piece of this and looking for more creative ways to not only leverage, but build passive income, as that's a strict, mantra of ours, then it's a wonderful way to do it. And just so you know, within the community, we have a few people who are specifically looking to take down some of these Texas notes, larger ones, to offer out partials, right? So part of the joy that you should be able to take advantage of with the community is that, hey, you see a note you like, just find out if someone's, taking a class with partial, or join the partial class and find out who's in it and who's open to it so you can understand it. And then you can start, taking a part of some of these larger notes without having the larger money. So I love it.
Yep. So I have a system that I call NERDS. And it's an acronym, but I like the NERDS part. And so I put all of the tapes through this tool that I use. And you can see this was the Oklahoma tape from March. So a lot of these notes are no longer on the tape. But I've filtered on P&I, I've filtered on remaining term. And I think there were some that didn't have enough information to calculate the remaining term. Loan status, of course, it has to be performing in order for it to be a partial. And then I added.
Amazing. I mean, you got to choose from anywhere from 8 all the way up to, it looks like, 15, 17, almost 20% in some areas. That's amazing. Beautiful.
Yeah, there's a couple that's 33 and 46.
Yeah.
There was some really good stuff on that Oklahoma tape. And then I added in this column called how many payments for UPB. And what I meant by that is it was a calculation of how many payments would I have to sell in order to cover what I paid for it. So in some cases, it didn't work. In some cases, I would have to sell more than the remaining number of payments, which I don't think I can show you on 2 screens. Like for this top one, there's only 35 payments remaining, but I'd have to sell 39. So if I was doing a search to see, okay, I only want to buy stuff that I can recoup all of my money by selling a partial, that would limit which ones I could buy off of this particular tape. So I look for a higher yield, because if the yield's already 15% and I can sell a partial, that's just going to make the yield even better. But as I demonstrated, you can do it with a 6% rate if that's what you want to buy as well. So any other questions or anything that you want to go through on the April tape that I can do a demo on what it would look like as a partial?
Alecia, I have one that I was looking at, but I'm not sure if it's going to be great. But I just said if no one had anything at this meeting, I would bring this one up. It's on the performing notes one. It's Kokomo, Indiana, 912 West Lincoln.
Okay, let me enter in that information.
So right off the bat, it had a coupon of 10%. So that's if you look at those right away, you can extrapolate that. You know, if you can get anywhere north of that, you got double digits on the yield, right?
Yes.
So that's a good.
And this one, what was the pricing guidance on the, say 95%? Yeah. 2 times 85. Okay, so PB payments 8%. All right, so with this, if you just wanted to sell 60 payments, you'd have a net yield of 17%. If you wanted to get all of your money back, how many payments? Sir? You'd have to sell at least 210 of 215. So if that's if that's the strategy you were going for, this might not be the greatest note for that. Because you'd only have, 3 payments left on the back end, 3 to 5, depending on how much you wanted as upfront partial, which might be fine. That might be what you're wanting to do because you're just wanting to grow your portfolio that way. But this one probably isn't great for the partial just because of how small the balance is. But I mean, you could, $200 a month is nothing to sneeze at either. So you could use it as a split partial as well. And your yield on that is 20% if you're selling 5 years worth.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we've squeezed enough out of your brain just for without getting into the class. So this will be a great addition to what we've learned from you. If you don't have any other questions, I think you put the link in the chat, right?
Yep, I put the link in the chat. The next session is June 15th. It's a Saturday. It's from 9 until 1 Pacific time. So I'd
and
love
we'll put
to
more
see you guys
links
there.
inside the mastermind for you guys to join when you can. Thank you so much. If you don't have any other questions, we'll let everyone go. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alecia.
Thanks. Yeah.